This is Rudo Radio coming to you from the 559.
Hello and welcome to Rudo Radio, SB Nation and Cage Side Seats weekly wrestling podcast. I am Nick Bond, and although I am joined by Mark, nobody really cares about that because we have a really great guest this week. Kate Foray, I pronounced that right. Right, Kate?
Yes.
The creator of the RAW Breakdown project. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the RAW Breakdown project is going to be in its second year in May, and basically every week I watch WWE Raw, and I take notes for all 3 hours and some change, and at the end of it, I create an infographic that kind of breaks down Raw in graphic form. Like I do pie charts, kind of breaking down how much commercial time is spent, how much time is spent on the actual wrestling versus promo time, how many appearances by everyone is made over the course of the 3 hours, how much time is dedicated to the women, how much time is dedicated to the cruiserweights, and basically anything else that comes to mind. Lately, I've been keeping track of how many times Francesca 2 Turbo is being played. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
What was the original setup for it? Like, what was it that you were tracking?
So it kind of started out as like a conversation that I was having with people like while we were watching Raw, and it kind of it really initially was observing people complaining about how many commercials Raw was having, and I had never really noticed it just because I'm like, well, it's 3 hours, like of course there's going to be a lot of commercials to compensate for that. And so from there it kind of turned into like, what would happen if I were to like turn this into an infographic? And at the time, and still, like, I was looking for a new job, and I'm a graphic designer, like, in real life, outside of wrestling. And so when I was starting to look for jobs there, every application that I found was people asking me if I had infographic experience, and I didn't have it. So I was like, well, I need to add it to my portfolio, and what's a way to do that? Because it's not really a common thing that people look for. Like, I do freelance with, like, nonprofits and stuff like that, and they don't necessarily are, like, that's not the first thing that comes to mind. It's always, like, logos or reports or something like that. So I'm like, I like wrestling and I like graphic design. Let's figure out a way to put the two of them together. And I kind of went in with this idea of like, oh yeah, like Raw does too many commercials and this and that. It was like, oh no, like seems like the most appropriate amount of commercials. But this women's time, I don't know about this women's time. So let's look into that further. And it just kind of jumped off from there.
You mean it was like, holy shit, this is insane that there's 3% of the entire show's dedicated to one women's story?
Pretty much. Like, I had always known that it wasn't a focal point, but in the midst of me starting it, I'm trying to think now, like, the timeline was, I had started it in May, so it was after WrestleMania. And so as it was leading into, like, that August was when they did the beginnings of the Women Revolution. And so for me, it was like, this is perfect because now I can see, I can kind of, like, I have receipts to see if this is actually going to be something that they're going to be doing, because you always assume, like, everyone always figured out, like, yeah, the women aren't getting that much time, but to actually see it, like, in a pie chart, like, yeah, 3% versus everything else that they do is insane, because it's like, what is WWE spending their time doing over the course of 3 hours? Like, you have 3 hours and change every week to progress storylines. What exactly are you spending your time doing if you're not doing that? So that's kind of where a lot of the focus ends up being when I present it, but I try to like present other things too as it progresses over time.
It's really useful to look at because, I mean, you had 2 weeks ago, I think, Mick Foley talking about, the reason SmackDown is beloved is because it doesn't have to contend with the extra hour of programming that Raw does. And our kind of counter-argument to that was, well, more often than not, Raw does not use their time well.
Yeah.
So being able to look at it and say, like, well, if they'd stopped spending this much time every single week doing this, and instead remember they had Nia Jax for more than 30 seconds a week, or remember there were all these other people that they could be utilizing in some capacity. it would be a better show. So kind of having, like you said, receipts for all of this, it's really helpful.
Yeah, and that was the thing. And after the first year, I did like an annual report that was basically like kind of combining and condensing an entire year of Raw and just kind of seeing like over time, is there like not storylines, but if there's some sort of like method to their madness. And the one big thing that I wanted to do was to see if everyone's argument of Roman Reigns being shoved down our throats was as true as it was. And it really wasn't. Like, that was the most fascinating thing to me. Like, I totaled everyone's total appearances. Like, I count each individual segment, and I counted like appearances for the entire year. And Roman Reigns wasn't even in the top 5. So for, it's just interesting for me to just see and be able to analyze it from a different perspective. All these general complaints about Raw, they're legitimate, but at the same time, like, you really kind of have to look and see, like, does it feel like it to you? Like, maybe it does, but is that actually true? Sort of thing.
Since you've actually had time to sit with the data a little bit, do you have anything in particular that really surprised you in a positive way? You were like, oh, wow, beyond negating something like Roman Reigns not being on the show as much as you thought, were you at any point like, oh, wow, they're actually giving a lot of time to certain mid-carder that surprises me, that like Sami Zayn?
I'm trying to think back. My most, actually, like, what was surprising to me is that the people that run Raw the most, and it meant like every single Raw, was New Day. Like, New Day was on every single Raw for the entire year, except for Xavier Woods missed like 1 or 2 Raws. But Kofi Kingston and Big E were on every single Raw. They were the top.
Fighting kids, doing work.
Like, that was a really cool thing to be like that, because you could see that and think, oh, New Day's been shoved down our throats, and they weren't. They were presented on Raw every week, sometimes multiple times throughout the show, but I don't think anybody ever complained about there being too much New Day. And yet there was a lot. There was a lot of New Day. Like, they were on every single show, and sometimes like more than once. So they're able to do that. They're able to have, a wrestler show up all of the time and present them in such a way that it doesn't feel exhausting. So that was something that was really interesting for me to see.
Yeah, I always found how much they relied on New Day, especially when they started to creep into the Hulk Hogan's best friend part of their main event run, where they were like kind of working with the top guys to be like, hey, we're top guys too. I started to notice that they were on all the time, so it's good to have that be like validated with actual data. What was the complete lack of airtime the most depressing thing you found, for women in particular, the most depressing thing you found? Or was it something like the fact that they'll spend 30% on, or I'm just looking right now at random episodes, like they spend a lot of time on recap? Mm-hmm. Was it, in other words, I guess my question would be, was it more annoying that they weren't spending time with the women's division, or that they were spending it with stuff that it was like, really? Really, this is more important than an entire division being showcased?
I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, because that was the other thing too, is that people being like, man, and they just recap all the time. And I thought the same thing too. And there are times where, yeah, the recap feels more so than usual. And it's noticeable, especially after like the day after a pay-per-view.
Which is somewhat understandable.
Yeah. And I'm somebody actually that, like, I have a lot of friends who are wrestling fans that live elsewhere. They don't live in my city. Like, the majority of my friends that live in my city that I hang out with on a daily basis, like, I have a couple that are like wrestling fans, but most of them are former, like, used to watch and don't watch anymore, but will come by like to watch WrestleMania or the Rumble, or have never watched it or haven't watched it in like 10 years. And so for me, like, to sit down with them, when you sit down for any like show you've never watched before, you freak out because it's like, oh, do I need to, like, I can't just jump into this blind. And I actually like that there's that much recap, that I can bring in somebody that's never watched before, and they start like, they're like asking me all these questions, and like, just wait, just like give it 5 minutes and they can figure it out. Like, it's annoying. I think it's annoying to people that are wrestling fans that watch on a weekly basis, but I think WWE goes in thinking and hoping that every week they at least pick up like one new person. Like, if one new person who hasn't watched before or hasn't watched in a really long time, jumps in and is like, oh yeah, like, I remember this, because that's happened to me. Like, I actually stopped. I've been watching wrestling since like 97, but I took like a 5-year break when I was in college. And I got back into it mid 2012. And the people that, like, when I left and then came back, like, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what was going on. Like, I recognized CM Punk. That was it. That was who brought me into it. But I had no idea what was going on. But I was able to figure it out within 2 episodes just based off the recaps. So it's not so much stuff like the recap that irritates me. It's stuff like there was that episode that had Enzo and Cass, like, they had like multiple segments throughout the show, and it led up to like Enzo being in that hotel room with Lana. And
God.
And I think that episode in particular, I ended up tracking it and actually included it in the breakdown. And their airtime, I think, was like 8%. And that week, the women's airtime was like in the same range. Like, they spent as much time on one storyline.
Which was a horrible story. Like, we spent so long explaining all of the things that were wrong about that on every conceivable level.
Yeah, like, I'm trying to remember when that was, but it was on par. Like, it was the same amount of time they spent on one division that they did on one storyline. So it's stuff like that. And I don't do that very often. Oh, hey, yeah, like, that's, you know, they always do that. But that one time I was like, this feels like they're doing, you know, I track every single individual. Here we go. So it was Raw Austin in December. They dedicated 16 minutes, which was like 8%, to just the Rusev, Lana, and Enzo and Cass storyline. The cruiserweights only had 9%, and then the women had 12%.
So embarrassing.
It was all like on par. Like, 2 actual divisions were given the same amount of time as just a singular storyline. That wasn't even like, it wasn't over a belt or anything. It was just, I don't even know what it was for. I still don't understand why they had that. But it wasn't even for like a title. It was just because. So
to, I guess, at this point, plant the seeds that Enzo and Cass are the real heels. Like, that's literally all I can think of. So that was one of my least favorite segments of all time. Well, multiple segments, apparently. Almost a tenth of the show.
Yeah.
Horrifying. Just truly horrifying.
When did you start recapping SmackDown?
So I don't think I ever did it in the first year, but when they did the brand split, I said that I would do a special one-off. I think I did the actual brand, the draft episodes of Raw and SmackDown, and then I did the first episode after the draft of Raw and SmackDown. So those were and then I did a comparison graphic between the two of them. But I don't do SmackDown. For a while I was doing it occasionally. I do it for my like Patreon subscribers, but I don't do it right now just because to watch Raw and then to do it takes like 5 hours, like to do that I wouldn't be doing virtually any other project or anything like that. So I started doing like just comparing the women because I noticed as SmackDown was kind of coming into its own that like on top of everything else, they were dedicating multiple storylines concurrently with the women. And I was like, I should just start keeping an eye out on this just to see. Because for a while when I was doing Raw, like I always had people asking me like, well, what would you ideally like to see Raw do with the women? And I didn't know how to answer that because I'd never seen it happen before. I've never seen like the women treated in such a way to be like, yeah, that's what I want. So for me to vocalize it, I didn't know how to answer that. And then SmackDown started doing it. I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I've been asking for. I don't know. I don't speak for all people, but let's compare the two. Like, this is what I wanted. I wanted concurrent storylines. I wanted all the women used. And I didn't want, like, just a title storyline. I wanted them to have, like, stuff that was about something beyond the title. And definitely not just over a man. Like, that's the other thing, too, that you have to contend with.
Well, there is only 2 storylines in wrestling. Sorry, I can't even finish that joke. But for a really long time, that was the only 2 things you could do. How much in the last 2 years, in your mind, less like statistically, but in terms of the eye test, how much has that changed for you in terms of, and not just beyond Sasha and Charlotte being in the main event more often than ever has, or really ever has been before? Is there a noticeable change, or is it kind of like the actually there aren't that many commercials thing?
I think there's been a noticeable change because I think the biggest thing, it's not even like graphically, it's not even about the time, the fact that they were given the women's title and now they're called superstars instead of divas, like that. They could have just done that and I just would have been like, I wouldn't have been satisfied, but like that, because, you know, when they did the Women's Revolution, that's when I thought they would do it, was to be like, okay, Women's Revolution, you're women now. Like, you're not divas. But it took like a couple more months for them to be like, And I guess that makes sense, like at WrestleMania, to do something special, like reveal the title. But that's when I kind of realized that, they're taking it somewhat seriously. Like, it's definitely like part of WWE's marketing to finally be like, yeah, like everyone else is, finally accepting that women should be treated and more so than like eye candy and fighting over a butterfly belt and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're finally catching up to it. Like, it's not quite too little too late, but it's definitely like, you guys did this. Like, you guys created that image of the women fighting over a butterfly belt for a 5-minute bathroom break. So you're basically fixing what you created. So I think there's a noticeable difference. I think there's still a ways to go. But yeah, I think in the last 2 years, just to see like, like you said, like to have them in the main event and have it no longer be like, I thought that the first time they did the main event, it was great. But the first time they did it without them like touting it as historic was great, because it's like it should just be accepted that this is what's going to happen. It's no longer historic. It should just be. That's what it should be. Like, nobody should be like, oh, this is so special. It's like, no, this is what it should have been. Like, women can be in the main event, the men can be in the main event. We can switch it out. It's fine. It's not this like, the day that they don't make a big deal out of it is the day that it's like, okay, this is an established thing and we can kind of like not move on, but like accept it. And this is a thing that's going to happen. This is normal. So
yeah. Mark and I always talk about the fact that how that the women's divisions have started to arrive is they put them in the same shitty gimmick matches that they do for any man.
Yeah. Like dolls count anywhere. It's like, yeah, this is great. Like, everybody's rolling their eyes, like, no, this is what they've been doing. Like, with the men, like, let them have it. Like, they're trying to get all this history out of the way. Like, this is how they want to do it. It's fine. They got to, like, push all the shitty history out of the way and create new history. So they're trying. They get a gold star. They don't get like all of the stars, but they get a gold star.
My major complaint at this point is that it feels like SmackDown remembers the women, but WWE doesn't necessarily. And I know that sounds confusing, and like, because WWE is SmackDown and vice versa, but it's like at the Royal Rumble, SmackDown's women's division were put on the pre-show when there were 2,000 people in the arena or whatever. I mean, I've been to one of the Big Four shows at that time, and there's nobody there. There's like just a few thousand people there.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And, you're setting up where we don't know what's at WrestleMania necessarily. Like, it's not written in stone yet. We have a pretty good idea. What's going on with the SmackDown Women's Championship? Will it be on the pre-show or the main show? So, like as much as steps are being taken forward, and SmackDown's doing a really good job, especially, it feels like as a whole there's still a lot to do just there, like allowing them to flourish outside of the blue brand bubble.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because that was the whole thing, was that, Royal Rumble is one of the Big Four, and so of course they need a pre-show, but did it really have to be like all the SmackDown women? Like, they've been working their ass off. They should be on the main show. Like, switch it out with anything else. And that's what I worry about. I hope with WrestleMania that they're on the main show, because at this point, the pre-show and the main show are really just all the same show. But like you said, like, people aren't there yet. And I remember the Royal Rumble, like, I had people coming over to watch it, and they showed up and they had already missed like 2 of the matches they wanted to watch. They're like, I wanted to watch Becky wrestle. And I'm like, she already did. Like, she's done. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, they already threw her out there. Like, it's little things like that I mean, like, they're trying, but they're not trying hard enough. There's still some kicking of the feet along the way, Yeah,
and it's a weird situation, because you can argue that, like, SmackDown doesn't have the same, like, star power in the women's division as Raw does, but that's because you're not featuring them in the same way that you feature the 3 women from Raw that you always feature. So
exactly,
it's an easily solvable problem.
I say, like, if your argument is like, well, like, we don't see like, Becky and Alexa on the same level, I'm like, well, whose job is that to do? It's your job. It's your job to do that. Like, same with Naomi. Like, Naomi's had a fan base for years, like years upon years, and for her to just get the title now is honestly like a travesty. It's offensive for her to have just now gotten the title, because she should have gotten it way, way earlier. And for them to be like, well, the fact that it took like a brand split to kind of do that is just...
And 2 full title cycles.
Yeah. it's frustrating because they kept saying like, oh, she's been here from the beginning and she's so athletic and she's worked so hard. I'm like, yeah.
She's been doing that. That was true 2 years ago when you should have put the title.
She's been doing that. It's not like she's brand new from NXT. Like, she's been doing that. Like, what the fuck have you been doing? Like, for months, she was off, not injured, just off TV. Like, whose fault is that? You guys booked the show. It's not our fault. It's not my fault that I'm not cheering for Naomi if she's not on my television every week. I can only shout about it on Twitter for so long. Like, I see you guys are seeing it, but I'm not going to cheer for her, like, at a show if she's not there. They're in charge. Like, that's the thing is, like, they complain, but it's like, you're responsible for this. That's the thing. It goes back to, like, you created this mess. You created this mindset. You have taught the fans to behave a certain way when women are wrestling in the ring, and you have to work to unlearn that and teach them a different way. So...
And I think that is where it gets kind of... They think it's harder than it actually is what I should actually say, because my dad isn't the most woke person on earth, but he pretty easily watched women's wrestling and went, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's not... And he literally has a Trump sticker on the Volvo I gave him.
Yeah. Like, you just have to put them out there and watch it. Like, not do something stupid with it. Like...
And his complaint was the same complaint that we had about the Nikki Natalia match, which was, this is really long. Like, that was his complaint. But he watched the other two matches on the card and was like, this is totally... Like, there is not a noticeable difference in terms of the quality of the match. They just have usually longer hair.
Yeah.
And, like, that's about it.
Yeah.
Something I always thought was interesting is for years ago, I did an interview for a story that never came out. But in it, Dave Meltzer, I asked... If you were to show someone who'd never seen wrestling that would get them to be fans quickest, he said women's wrestling in Japan in the early 1990s, instantly. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was incredibly interesting, not because he was just trying to sound cool, but because he genuinely instantly said that was instantly his, like, oh, that's the best possible version of wrestling I can remember seeing. And I always thought that was really interesting, that there's something to people who've watched a lot and to people who've watched very little, instantly translatable for women's wrestling that I think is even a problem. My dad thinks he can beat up every wrestler. He doesn't care whether or not he can beat up a women's wrestler. Yeah. Like, I think that's important. I don't think we judge people. Male viewers don't care about whether or not somebody, like, they don't have these preconceived notions once you get past them that I feel like they have with male wrestlers in a weird way. Like, they're pretty open. Most male wrestling fans that aren't idiots are very open to it. So there's not even the excuse of, like, oh, well, people will be weird about it. Like, they've shown it over and over again. That's absolutely, positively not the case.
I say, like, if you build a good storyline, then, like, that's all you should worry about. And there are times where, like you said,
exactly,
there are idiot wrestlers. Like, things have happened with women's matches and chants have occurred that would never happen in a male, in a male match. But if you build it, they will come. Build a great match, like, people will love it. Like, I don't understand. Like, you just have to work maybe a little bit harder, because there are those people that, might initially be like, women's match, I don't know. But if you just kind of, like, push that aside and just be like, fuck it, we're just gonna do it, I just let it happen. That was the problem for so long, and now they're doing it, which is great. But then there's always there's little things like Foley coming in and venting to Sasha and Bailey or Sasha and Charlotte about their match and getting hurt, and you don't understand. I'm like, wait, we already, like, that should have been something to worry about after. Like, you shouldn't be yelling at them about the match that you booked. Like, you already booked the match. Why are you freaking out? Like, somebody else should be freaking out. It's little things like that I'm just come on, just do it. Just let it happen.
I find all of this so hilarious because it's almost verbatim the complaints we had about all of the things that we're talking about on the show. Like, publicly, this is what we said was the problem with, for instance, Foley. It's just like, you did this. This is and even if it wasn't, it's your job to, like, you can just say we're not having the Hell in a Cell match. Stop lecturing them about how dangerous it is.
Like, if he wasn't commissioner and if he came out as a surprise, like, that's how you could do that. To be like, for somebody else, like Stephanie and any other commissioner to book the match and have him come out and be like, you don't understand, like, okay, that would be acceptable. But I'm like, Foley, you booked the fucking match weeks ago. Why are you freaking out now? Like, and stuff like that. But I'm just like, just let him wrestle. Like, don't make this out to be like bigger than it is. Like, just let it happen.
Are there things that are not... Is there a difference for you between things on wrestling that are just straight up misogynist or things that are problematic because of the patriarchy, for lack of a better term? Like, to me, that segment, as opposed to the Enzo segment, was problematic because it was, like, patronizing, where the Enzo segment was just horrifying on every level. Like, does one bother you? Because I feel like the patronizing ones are harder to, like, get rid of completely, but much more annoying, where I can just essentially dismiss the idea of the Enzo one as just a horrible thing that should never happen again. Does that make sense?
I think I see what you're saying. Like, so for me, like, I remember my reaction to Foley, it's more eye-rolling. It's like, oh, it's patronizing. And it's frustrating because everything I know about Mick Foley, the person, that's not really his character. Like, he's very supportive of women's wrestling. He is an advocate for, victims, like, abuse victims. He contributes with his programs with Rain every year. Like, he's that type of guy. So for him to kind of come in and be like, I called him like the Well Actually character. And I had some people disagree with me, like, well, like, he has that pissed. He has that history, and he understands the intensity of it. And I think they're like, yeah, he did come out for the men's match. And I was like, okay, it's a little bit more eye-rolling. For the Enzo segment, I was actually more offended by the confusion of how it was booked. Yes, there were misogynistic undertones, but for me, it was more so like, Enzo's supposed to be a face, so why is he being a misogynistic asshole? Like, it's like, there has to be some conflict in wrestling, and there has to be, like, it doesn't have to be misogynistic, but it's going to end up happening when you have a male and a female character kind of go up against each other. And that's what makes a good asshole, because he's being a fucking asshole, and you want to fight for her. And it's like, or you want her to, like, stand up. Like, and so I was always confused because Enzo's like a face. Like, he's a good guy. And why are we booing Rusev for trying to defend his wife's honor? They're married. And here you are calling her a prostitute and him a pimp. Like, what the, like, for me, it was more, I was like, yes, I was offended by the implication. But for me, it was just like, this is just poorly written. This is just a poorly written storyline all around.
I don't mean to laugh at this.
I was more offended by that, because I was like, this is not, and like, that was everyone, like, I had a lot of people being like, well, like, why are you being so, like, sensitive and a snowflake? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just offended by the bad writing. Like, if it was like a heel misogynistic character, then I'd be like, oh, fuck this guy, da-da-da. But he wasn't. He's supposed to be this face that you chance along with.
Yeah, he's the hero in this scenario. It's like, no.
Why is he the hero? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just bad. Like, it's just a bad thing. Like, for you to defend it and for that to be your hill to die on says way more about you as a person. Like, that was the thing. Like, for anybody to defend that segment just because it was, possibly I was insulting, like, the men in the segment, it's like, well, then you're a terrible person because you're defending Enzo. Like, you're defending this writing. Like, you're defending terrible wrestling writing. Like, that's just not good at all.
Which is a place you never want to be defending wrestling writing on any level.
Honestly, like, why are you defending of all the segments and storylines going on right now in wrestling? Like, why are you defending that one? Like, really? Is this like, that's where you're gonna, all right, that's where you're gonna stand? I see you.
Raw does have a consistent problem with, and I like Raw, so it's not, anyone listening, I'm not just attacking it because SmackDown's better, but SmackDown's better. And SmackDown's also, better. Raw doesn't seem to understand who their characters are a lot of the time.
Sometimes,
it's just kind of, it's like they've just written something out and then they figure out who they're going to put in it. And that Enzo thing's kind of like it, the Foley thing's kind of like it. The segment with Bayley on Monday was kind of like that, where it didn't really make sense with her. And it's not Bayley the way we know Bayley to be. And you lose something when you do that. And, you've lost something with Foley, you've lost something with Enzo and Cass. It feels like they've lost something with Bayley because you don't understand.
Sell out the character.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't understand what makes that character work. And now that's there. That's part of their history. So unless they can fix it in a hurry and make us forget about that sort of thing, it's a consistent problem that I feel like Raw has, that SmackDown does a better job of kind of like tying everything in together and making things make sense. So you can even kind of paper over something that didn't go well because at least it made sense for both the characters and just logically in general.
Does tracking things the way you do affect your ability to enjoy the show itself, or do you watch and then go back and check?
I do it at the same time. Like, I actually time the segments as I'm watching it.
God bless you.
I've gone back and watched segments on a whole, like, 90%, like 95% of the time, like, it doesn't affect the way I watch. But then there are times where I'm a little relieved on Tuesdays that I don't have to time the segment, like, completely on it, like, honestly, because I'm not watching it, I'm enjoying it more, and I'm not really watching it from an analytical perspective, but I try not to let that affect, like, it's gotten to that point where it's so mindless that I have everything set up that I can just press it as it's going, that it's not, I don't dislike doing it, and I don't enjoy the show any less. It's just that I feel like I worry sometimes because when I'm talking about Raw with people after the fact or when I'm watching it, I don't want to sound, what's the word? Because like we've talked about earlier, like having the receipts, but then sometimes it's like, you don't want to be annoying, but then sometimes you're like, no, you're wrong. Like, it wasn't really that long. Like, here, look, I timed it. Like, here, look, it was like, so I worry about being like obnoxious, I guess, about it, to be like, no, like, look. But then I have people like at me throughout the show to be like, hey, how long was that segment? How long was this? And so it makes it a little bit more interactive. And I find that I enjoy Raw. It's very like, I don't know, it's turned into this thing where I'm just watching it and I can anticipate Raw now. I figured out the formula. Like, I can figure out when they're going to commercial breaks and stuff like that. Like, I can, as I'm watching and I'm taking notes, I can figure out when the next commercial break is because it's been a while, and like I can anticipate stuff like that. So it's interesting that I figured out the formula of Raw. And then one day I'd like to like kind of go in and make up my own formula for Raw to see how that would compare. Like, that's been my response to it, is like, how would I do this? Like, not book Raw, but like seeing it.
Allocate segments for Raw.
How would you break Raw?
How would I go about doing this? How would anybody go about doing this? If they have the information presented to them that says like, okay, you have 100, 180, 185 minutes. How would you break this down? Remember that you have to take at least X number of 3-minute commercial breaks every so often, sort of thing. So
I cannot believe it's mind blowing to me that you record the times and watch at the same. Like, that would be a bridge too far for me. I'd be like, I can't even watch live most weeks. There's no way I could watch live and do something while doing it.
Well, because with Hulu is that they cut out segments, like they have to condense it down to 90 minutes. And so there are segments like, and there are times I've had to do that. Like my job sometimes requires me to go out of town or things happen. I try to, for the most part, like make sure like my Mondays and Tuesday nights are dedicated to wrestling just for me personally. Cause I need that time to myself. That's how I decompress. But there are times where it happens where I'm like, oh, I can't watch Raw, or I'm late. And if I'm like more than 15 minutes late to Raw, then I'm like, if I miss the first segment, because at least then I can time the first segment just looking at the clock. But after that, it's like, I'll just, I've actually watched Raw in a bar, like with a timer, and just taken like, it's been a more minimalistic design than usual, just because like, I feel like I have an obligation. Like, this is a thing that I signed up for, and this is what I do every week. And I've had people come over purposely just because they want to see how it works, because I'm live tweeting, I'm timing and taking notes, and I'm watching Raw at the same time.
So in this weird Joker-esque, like, hyper-sanity world that you live in, was there anything in particular that you liked from this week's Raw? And how, in terms of your understanding of time and time compression, do you literally feel like good long segments go quicker than bad long segments? Or at this point, are you just completely numb to that?
I can tell when there's, like, I get aggravated when there's a long segment. I still feel the same way. Like, if there's a long segment that's been going on long and, like, too long, it's more so that I'm, like, doubly annoyed because we're dedicating time to this instead of something else. And then it's like, this isn't even good to watch. Like, yeah, like the shorter segments are easier for me to kind of be like, okay, this makes sense. But if there's like a really short like wrestling match, then I get annoyed too, because it's like, well, this is supposed to be a wrestling show. Why was there a 5-minute match? Or why was there even like a match at all? Like, it's that type of thing.
And there were a lot of short matches on this Raw too. It was a good episode of Raw, but
I enjoyed it. Like, I really liked Kevin Owens. Like, I typically don't like really long opening segments because the majority of the time it's just a promo, but I really liked Kevin Owens' promo this week.
Yeah, it was like the return of like the really angry, vindictive Kevin Owens that initially showed up in WWE.
Yeah.
The monster heel Kevin Owens.
Yeah, so kind of reclaiming his spot at the top.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just looking over the breakdown from this week. A lot of Roman Reigns, long hair. He has the longest hair, I think, out of any of your figureheads.
Yes.
Is that intentional? I have to ask.
He has the longest hair of everyone, I think. Like, I think Brian Kendrick might match up a little bit, but his is like browner, I guess. But yeah, he was in all three segments, but not as long. Like, he was kind of popping up everywhere, which made sense. Like, that's the thing is, like, I can figure out the formula, like, oh, who's ever in the first segment is usually in the last segment, ending the show, like, type of thing. Like, this was the first time in a while, like, Kevin Owens opened the show, and then Kevin Owens, like, wasn't in the main event. So that was interesting to me.
That is very interesting. That's another one of those things where you kind of notice it, and then you actually see it written out, and you're like, oh, wow, that is really, really that is really something they end up doing over and over again. And then, like you said, you start to learn the formula. I'm also fascinated. How do you time the amount of, like, how do you have an entirely separate clocking mechanism for Francesca 2 Turbo?
Yeah, so I used
You do, that's amazing. Sorry.
So I use there's a website called onlinestopwatch.com, and so they have all these different timers you can use, and so I have 3 tabs open, one for, and I do it every hour, and so after just for the first hour, for example, I have a tab open with the stopwatch for commercial breaks, and then one for commercials, and then one for the active segment that's happening. And so, like, I start with a promo ends and, like, begins and ends, stop it, write down the time, clear it out, and then it goes to commercial, start the commercial timer, and then when it ends, like, end the commercial, and then go back to, like, the original, like, current timer, like, the one that kind of times everything throughout the show. And so with Francesca, like, I just take my phone and I open up the timer and just like every time Xavier Woods, like, blows, like, I hear it and I just start timing it. And it's kind of gotten bad. Like, it has affected me in the sense that, like, I started hearing trombone noises during other segments. Like, I hear phantom trombone noises, and I didn't notice it until, like, this week. And I was like, oh, this is not good. I need to stop listening for the trombone. Like, because most of the time he's off to the side, so it doesn't cut to him directly. You just have to listen for it. You just have to listen for the trombone to start the timer.
Look at a highlight spot on Raw this week. Stopping Russian hacking. Ice cream
I thought that was great, especially because it was about ice cream. Like, that's the most, like, PG way to explain it. Like, oh no, we can't have them take the ice cream plans. The
ice cream with booty juice in it.
Oh my god. Ben and Jerry's next flavor. Oh, that is horrifying. Sorry, I just love all of this. I'm still looking at the breakdown, just going through every individual. I love both the way that their heads are cut out. I love the skin tone that Brock Lesnar has, which is unlike basically anybody else's skin tone. It's some sort of weird.
He's very pink. He's a very pink man. Like, he's so scary, but he's actually kind of pink. Like, he's like a Easter bunny.
His 2 shades are essentially pink and purple.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah. He's like, his normal color is pink, and then when he's mad, he's like actual, like, a plum. Like.
Yeah, he was a weird color this week on Raw.
Oh my god.
With his face so close to it was like, ooh, you did not run a weight test on this thing at all.
You did not test this at all. It's all up in there. Like, he's not an attractive man. Like, that's all I'll say about Brock Lesnar because I don't want him to beat me up. But, like, he's just not a very attractive man.
He's a beautiful monster, though, and he has going.
From a monster perspective, he's lovely. From a human perspective, now.
I mean, you can only get so attractive when you are made up out of Jimmy John's and corn. That's
true. All that salt's going to get to you at some point.
He has no moisture left in his body. Can you notice when someone's becoming a main eventer? Like, Braun Strowman seems like he's getting more and more time. Do you break it down on the back end by hour, in the sense that, like, can you say, well, 30% of the time this year Roman Reigns has been in the last hour of the show kind of stuff, or do you not have it that granular in terms of your actual database?
I actually can. Like, if I wanted to go back, like, so my notes look like I have the name of the show, and then it's broken down by hour. And so I have, like, hour one is, like, this week it was, like, from 8 to 8:57. And then I have a list of every single competitor who showed up in the first hour. And then in parentheses, I have the, how many times they showed up. And then each individual segment is listed who was in it, what it was, and then the time. So if I wanted to, I could go back and find, like, how many times Braun Strowman showed up, and then count the individual minutes of those segments that he showed up in and do that. And I think I did that with Roman Reigns last year. I actually did, like, a longitudinal study of the percentage of time. Actually, no, I did a percentage of time. So I did his appearance count, but then I did a study of the WWE champion and the percentage of time that they were on Raw while they were champion. It was like Rollins and Triple H and then Sheamus and then Roman Reigns. And I just tracked over time for the entire year, like, how many times they showed up on Raw, or if they showed up at all. Because, like, when Triple H was champion, like, I don't think he showed up at all. And then even Roman Reigns was gone for a little bit while he was champion. So yeah, I could do that. I could realistically go back and say this is the amount of time that they've spent on an individual person. I just haven't done it yet, which I might do, because I'm going to do an annual report for the second year. So I might do that and just kind of track and see, like, because I just do a list of each individual's total appearance times, but I'd be kind of curious to see, like, actual time-wise, how much time was spent on them. Because, yeah, you can kind of see when somebody's kind of getting a little bit of a push. Like, that was the thing I wanted to go back and see, was, like, could I track and see when Roman Reigns was getting like, pushed to the moon? And you could kind of see it, but it wasn't, like, as in your face as, like, from, like, a study perspective. It was very subtle.
Probably helps that the Shield was always on television for so long, so it's not like there was necessarily more Roman Reigns, it was just more solo Roman Reigns.
Yeah, like, he was always already there, and so then it was, like, but he was quiet. He didn't really, I don't remember a lot of, like, solo Roman Reigns monologues as the Shield. He was like,
I don't remember a lot of solo Roman Reigns words, let alone monologues.
He
wasn't
wasn't
really,
great like a talker. And so, like, I think that was the thing that really got to everybody, is that he finally, like, if he was going to be in the main event, he had to actually start saying words. Like, he wasn't going to Brock Lesnar it. And even Brock Lesnar talks now. Like, that was, like, he was never a strong, silent character. Like, so they gave him the mic, and it was like, oh. And then he was bad. So that was the other thing. Like, it's more memorable if you're, like, not good.
Do you got anything else, Nick, or do we want to?
Oh no, I'm trying to think if there's any way I can talk about how awesome. Did you? I'm just going to ask both of you. Did you both love the, as Mr. Brendan Shred called it, the Hospocalypse at the end of this week's Raw? Because, man, that sung a little song in my heart.
I thought it was going to be. So, like, as the time went on, I was watching and seeing, like, oh, we have Sasha versus Charlotte, but then we also have Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn. Oh, and then we have that interview of Brock Lesnar, like, and it was, like, I think it was, like 5 or 10 till, and I was like, oh, that match, the way that they were talking was, like, oh, the ring is going to collapse, it's going to be, like, a 5-minute segment. It didn't. It went to, like, 11:15, and it was fantastic. Like, it was, like, they actually wrestled, and that was completely unexpected. Like, I didn't see that coming. I was like, oh, they're just gonna, because they kept touting, like, oh, we reinforced the ring, and I'm like, oh, that ring is gonna fucking break. Like, it's gonna break, and that's gonna be how it ends. Like, that's how the show ends, is they broke the ring. And then they didn't. I was a little disappointed they didn't break the ring, but it was a really good match. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go wrong with, like, two giant mountains of beef just throwing each other around. And, I mean, Big Show looks awesome, which is great. And
he's in good shape.
He was moving around real well, and Braun Strowman is just, like, people that big shouldn't be able to do, like, rolls during a wrist lock and then kip up.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just so hilarious that he can do that.
That's the proper reaction to that, is just, like, nervous giggling, because there's a human being who can do that. That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. That's an abomination, and it shall surely be put to death. I mean, geez Louise. Yeah, he is really something else. So we talked about it earlier, but I am interested in whether or not, because you said correct me if I'm wrong, this week had the highest percentage ever for a women's focus on either show, or as far as you've measured?
As far as I can probably say with as much confidence as I can that any time before, like, so the first Raw episode I ever like started tracking was May 4th, 2015. I feel like I can be pretty confident in saying like they've never had 34% of women, even 20 or even 16% of time dedicated to women prior to that, because prior to that was the era of the butterfly belt. And so, yeah, I can't say for certain, because I'm sure some asshole's going to come in and be like, well, actually, let me tell you about this episode in 2007. And I haven't watched, like, there's a whole chunk of time of wrestling that I didn't watch, so maybe I'm wrong. But in the time that I've been watching, in at least 2 years, like, yeah, 34% is a pretty fucking big deal.
Does that include the time spent on commercials, or is that just straight up SmackDown time?
That's straight up SmackDown time. So when I time the Raw breakdowns, I time the commercials completely separate. And so I did the same thing with SmackDown. I didn't time the commercials because I was really just timing, like, because I was curious with the SmackDown thing. I don't do the full SmackDown thing yet, but when I'm doing, I just track what is being aired to me as, you know, sitting on my couch watching television. And
at least SmackDown's a straight 2 hours every time.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so I compare it, to 2 hours, and then, you know, but like the actual airtime that we're presented to, because that's what I assume WWE has deemed important compared to commercial time.
Makes sense. They did a real good job advancing a bunch of storylines and kind of doing more with the Maurice Nikki Bella thing than just, hey, you bumped into her and your face got powdered.
Yeah.
Which was fine. You know, I think the Miz and Maurice are petty enough to start a feud based on accidentally getting powdered, but it's much more exciting that then she crashed into Maurice the second time and then got beat down with a lead pipe.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I like that the first time it was like, oh, that's just a thing that happened. And then the second time, oh, now Maurice is, like, pissed. And now Cena's going to be on Miz TV next week. So it's like, ooh, what's going to happen there? Because Miz already doesn't like Cena. And Maurice, like, they're slowly starting to, like, they're acknowledging with Total Divas, they're acknowledging that Nikki and John are in a relationship. And so I know people get bummed out about that because it's like, oh, they're talking about it. But, like, no, it's an actual thing. Like, this is a thing that we can talk about. They both okayed it, so I'm not really that bummed out about it. It's giving them time. It's giving them something to work with.
I like Total Divas a lot. I think some of the biggest successes from Total Divas have been when they've been able to integrate characteristics of the people that you learned on that show into their actual characters. So Natalya as a heel has worked out well because you watch Total Divas and you're like, well, she kind of is.
Yeah.
Like, she's well-meaning, but
she's kind of, she's a little intense. Like, people are like, oh, she's a cat lady. And I'm like, I understand that. My soul sister, a cat lady person, but, like, she's a little, like...
nuts?
She's a little, yeah. And so, like, for her to, like... And I think that's the other thing, too, is, like, people complain about Total Divas. I initially didn't like it because I wasn't watching Total Divas. So the first go-around they did it, when they started bringing in the Total Divas storylines onto Raw, I didn't know what was going on because I wasn't watching Total Divas. And so I was like, why are we talking about things that have already presumably happened and are aired? But I think they've kind of gotten into a groove, and they figured it out. And they're just kind of acknowledging the relationships, not carrying over storylines from Total Divas from the show, because that doesn't make sense to, like, because they tape it months in advance. But they have to acknowledge that with Total Divas, they brought in a whole other group of fan, like type of fan they started watching wrestling because they wanted to see the women that they watched on Total Divas. And it's like, okay, why not acknowledge that on wrestling? Like, yeah, like, that's what they want to see. Who am I to say, well, no, I don't want that. Like, I'll watch something else. Or there's other things for wrestling for me. Not everything on WWE TV is for you at this point. Like, there's enough programming every week that you don't have to watch something if you don't want to. And, like, there's something for everybody. Like, and if you can't find anything, like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you, because I'm able to find something every week that I enjoy. Like, there's never been a week where I'm like, I've hated everything about wrestling. Like, then I'll just stop watching. That's what I did the first time. Like, I didn't like any of this, and so I stopped watching for 5 years. So it's doable. Or you go watch something else. Like, go watch another promotion. So.
Yeah, there's certainly plenty out there. And
yeah, there's so much now, especially compared to when I stopped. I'm like, oh, there's all these streaming services. So.
Yeah, if you didn't, I mean, because I stopped, I think, just based on what you're saying, around the same time you did, and I basically stopped watching wrestling altogether because, what else was out there?
Yeah, there was nothing to watch, so...
But yeah, coming back in 2012 and seeing like, hey, wait, Mike Mizanin?
Yeah.
Really?
I remember him from the real world. Okay, he actually became a wrestler. That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, it was kind of... when people see The Miz, you have to explain to them, like, no, not only is he really a wrestler, he's unbelievably good at his job. That's like my...
I'm so glad he's finally getting his due because he's the best. I love him. He's such a dick. It's great. It's fantastic.
My first appearance on this show was technically Mark asking a question I had asked about whether or not you would rather have The Miz or Ziggler. So I am a ride or die Miz fan forever. I also hate Dolph Ziggler. That's a completely different show. But The Miz, for me, is a guy who proves to... not necessarily cheesily tie everything together, that if you give someone who is talented the time to showcase their skills, they will almost always end up, and it's the same thing with Luke Harper, AJ Styles. It's a lot about, me and my friend Matt Timmons actually spent some time working on this. Time is far and away, as your entire project indicates, the most important thing on television. It's like the one commodity where there is actual scarcity, and I find... it's fascinating how often, if you just give somebody who's talented time, it will work out in the end, and how often they refuse to just give people time.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's, like, not just a WWE problem. I think that's a WWE fan problem. That's just a wrestling fan, or any fan, but if we're talking about wrestling and WWE, that's a WWE fan problem, that they don't give time. They become very impatient. Like, they want instant gratification when something happens in wrestling, and it's like, you can't... This is a weekly episodic program. Like, you have to give it a second. Just give it a second. If if it's been like 4 weeks and it's still not working, then yeah. Like I think when the Enzo cast thing first started, I was like, we'll give it a second. And then after it played out, I was like, okay, now I will agree. This is I'm with you guys. This is dumb. Like, but you have to just give it a second to breathe and develop. Like, things can't happen instantaneously all of the time. It doesn't make sense. It just can't, because then you run out of things to do, and then that's when we have, like, shit.
Did you find yourself getting more patient with the product through watching it through this lens, or is it about that you were always patient with the product, and this is just like you said earlier with the receipts, being able to be like, no, I know what I'm talking about. Here's a list of all, like, if you want to argue with me about whether or not that segment was good is different than whether or not it got too much time kind of thing. Or, like, was it the chicken or the egg, I guess, would be the best way to ask that.
It was probably a little bit of both, because, so I started this project, I started this project in, like, May 2015, and so at the time I had been watching wrestling again more consistently at that point for about, like, 2.5 years. And coming back into, when I started watching wrestling, I was 10 years old. And then when I stopped watching wrestling, I was in college. And so I'd already watched it for 10 years, give or take. And so to watch it as a kid and a teenager, I feel like you see it through a different lens than you do as an adult. When I started getting back into watching wrestling again, I was a completely different person. I was a completely different adult. So it's hard to tell, because I didn't really get to evolve with the product. We kind of broke up and evolved separately and came back together. So I don't know, because I remember as a kid I don't think I ever thought as a kid, like, well, give it a second. Like, like getting really upset about certain things. And it was a different product too, I think, is the other thing. Is it's hard to, like, they had a lot of instant gratification on, like, in the Attitude Era. It was a lot of, like, in your face, like, there wasn't, like, I don't remember any long, drawn out, like, maybe when Austin got hit by a car, like, that's the one thing I remember. It was like, it was a long, drawn out thing, but then it ended up being Rikishi, and it was like, oh, really?
He did it for The Rock.
He did it for The Rock? Oh, all right.
And he did it for the people.
Yeah, like, okay, like, yeah, like, I don't recall a lot of it, and that might just be because I was a kid, and so I was really just watching it, just because I liked, people fighting. I think, yeah, with the project, I've become more analytical to be like, well, like, I can kind of see and anticipate something is happening here. So it's probably a little bit of both. And I'm watching it as an adult and like watching it as somebody that like, I'm a designer. And so like, I'm very analytical and I work in like marketing and understanding. I see it from a different perspective in general, I think, than a lot of people. I think like anybody in a different, depending on your background, you'll look at it in a different perspective, because sometimes I see WWE doing things and I'm like, well, that makes sense from like a marketing perspective. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you gotta like draw things out. And so, yeah, I think I've gotten more analytical about it as I've gotten older, and then just based on my background and with the project, it's all encompassing. So, yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both.
To go back to needing to be patient and burning through ideas, I feel like you have a lot of fans who feel like the second their guy comes up, like they need to be right there at the top, and like there's a lot of skipping, and a lot of it's people who like complain about Roman Reigns being shoved down our throats or something, and it's like, yeah, but my guy should be up at the top and immediately and all the time.
Yeah.
And you think back on like when we were younger and how long it would take some of those guys to get to the top. Like, wrestling isn't a thing where your whole career just happens in a year or in 6 months or even 2 years or 5 years. It takes time.
Yeah.
How many characters did JBL go through before he became like a world champion, a WWE Hall of Famer? Edge was in tag teams forever and then became like another guy who was a Hall of Famer. So it doesn't have to happen, and unless you're just here to watch for 6 months or whatever. And you can all be calm about it and just like wait and see what's going to happen, because they've already got the people who came up years ago like in the scene now, doing their thing now, and everyone will have their turn. Everyone who should have their turn will have their turn for the most part.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because like Stone Cold didn't start out as Stone Cold. Like, The Rock didn't start out as The Rock. Like, I think with NXT, I think a lot of people also forget that not everybody watches everything, and not everybody especially watches NXT. Like, there is a crossover of fans who watch NXT and WWE TV, but there are a lot of people. I was in the crowd when Kevin Owens made his debut, because they were in Richmond, and he made his debut against John Cena in the Open Challenge. I was on the floor, like I was like second row ringside, and I was the only person in my section who knew who he was. Like, these are people who paid like $100 to sit on the floor for Raw, and people didn't know who he was. And it's like, he's been like, I was able to be like, oh, it's Kevin Owens, and he was on NXT, but nobody knew who he was. Like, it was very, you have to realize that. You have to realize that not everybody knows your guy. Not everybody is going to feel the same way about your guy. There are people that go to WWE events and wear like, wear the Ryback shirt. There's nothing wrong with that. They're a Ryback fan. I don't understand why, but they're there to see Ryback. Like, that's the guy they're going to go see. And not everybody is going to like freak out over Finn Balor. Not everybody's going to freak out over Kevin Owens. And it's like, you have to understand that's what you're trying to contend with. That's what WWE is trying to contend with, is trying to like, if they're going to put them as the world title holder, like they have to be a little bit more established. Like, not everybody likes Sami Zayn. Like, I think it's the thing is like, yeah, he's your guy, but he's not everybody's guy.
Yeah. And I mean, to bring it around, if you give Sami Zayn the time,
yeah,
many more people will come around on him, but
you have to reintroduce him to a whole group of people that have never met him before.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, and NXT does certainly confuse the issue. And sometimes it's hard to tell where they plan on putting someone. Like, Tyler Breeze was in the main event at NXT all the time.
Yeah.
And now he's in a comedy tag team that like they won't allow to win a match, which is a whole other story that I don't even want to get into.
Yeah.
But
there are people that still love Tyler Breeze. Like,
I love what's not to love?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they love him in that role. Like, they think it's great. And maybe that's where he's better. Like, not everybody can be in the main event at the same time. It's not going to work. Like,
yeah, it gets crowded.
Yeah.
There's
the ring literally gets crowded. There's just too many people.
That is when the ring will collapse, if everybody is in the main event for the main title. Like, that's why we have the US title. That's why we have the IC title. Like, that's a whole other argument that I have, that those titles get forgotten at times, but that's why we have those lower tier titles, like, because that should be the stepping stone for you to move on to the main event. And we need people to be able to take that step. They can't just immediately jump into the main event role and win the title. Like, it's not going to work. Especially if you have a guy like Balor who wins the title and gets injured right away. And it's like, well, shit, we don't have a plan. Like,
so we just spent years at NXT prepping him to immediately succeed.
Yeah, and then
now he's hurt.
And he got hurt. Like, what are we going to do? Because we didn't, it's all like, you got to wait for, you have to have other people that you can just kind of like slowly slide into that role without it appearing weird.
And that's how Roman Reigns ended up getting a push in the first place, was Daniel Bryan was hurt, and they didn't want John Cena at the top anymore.
Yeah.
So Cena was really a transitional champion, and like there was just all these other moving parts, and then that's it's like the guy everyone wanted to win was out. The guy nobody wanted to win was there.
Yeah.
And then the guy people thought they wanted to win was there, and they went with that one.
Yeah. And sometimes they're wrong. Like, not everything WWE... I'm not trying to defend it. Like, everything they do is great, and we should just accept it and move on. Like, no, they do shitty things, and we should call them out when they do shitty things. But it's like, at the same time, like, you have to... It's a give and take. Like...
Yeah, there's... Just, you gotta wait sometimes and see how things are going to unfold.
Yeah.
And I don't know, people
I'm
see...
thinking of the Louis C.K. bit of, can you just give it a second? Could you give it a second?
That's where I get it from, because I'm just like, I've always been saying that. I'm like, where do I just have this phrase in my head of like, just give it a second. It was Louis C.K. I was like, why am I keep saying that? And I know I didn't come up with it. It's just in my head. I'm like, just give it a second. Like, just, come on.
Like, you ever contributed anything to the... Mark, did you have anything else you wanted to ask? Or did you want to...
Can we talk about the Battle Royal for a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you mean the
sloppy as
SmackDown?
fuck finish. But outside of that, like, awesome. That is an example of me being like, okay, I'm going to give it a second.
Yeah.
Because, whatever, like, obviously Luke Harper hit second, but I'm willing to suspend, suspension of disbelief. And just be like, oh yeah, well, I guess they don't have the camera angle on it, none of the refs saw it, and oh no, we'll have to watch Luke Harper and AJ Styles wrestle. Wow, that's...
Sad
so
face.
Yeah.
I know. That really sucks that Luke Harper's in the main event. Damn it. Like...
with the direct path to one of the main events of WrestleMania.
Exactly.
Aw, shucks.
Here's a guy we're trying to push up into the main event. Oh, that's shitty. Like, come on. Like,
yeah, I'm considering it to be like like they cheaped out on special effects.
yeah.
But I'm not going to let it detract from the cool story and,
Yeah, this was actually something Mark and I were talking about before the show, which is the idea that as long as it looks good for the video package before the match, it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't really care. I'm gonna, like, if you screw up a small thing, I mean, obviously if the storyline shit, the storyline shit. Yeah. But if you, like, screw up a small thing like that, I really don't care as long as you can edit it to make it look like it went okay.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, like, when they started doing, when they started jumping into the Rollins Triple H thing, there was a couple people that were like, oh, really? This is what we're doing? They did that freaking package, and it was fantastic. Like, yes, I'm so excited. Like, I was kind of like, oh, okay, this is cool. But then with the package, like, if nothing else, WWE does amazing video packages to get me excited about matches that I might not have been super, super down for. Like, they get me hype. Like, it's great. Like, yeah, like if they just, they're gonna cut that out.
They're going to go from the moment they started falling, and then the moment they are on the ground. And we'll just miss the in-between and be like, oh, wow, yeah, totally came to a draw.
They're going to put a filter on it. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
With cool music and, like, a drop noise.
Yes.
And then, like, a cymbal crash.
It's going to be like a blurred slow motion. You won't even see that they fucked it up.
You get such a good sense of how great WWE's video team is, and for how long, when you go back and watch WCW pay-per-views, and then watch an old WWE pay-per-view from the same time, and you're like, this is the work. Like, even if it's a really good WCW pay-per-view or match or whatever, you're like, this is horrific.
Yeah.
This is not aged well at all. And then WWE's like, oh my god, this video is making me enjoy Limp Bizkit song. What's wrong with me?
There are people
so
that are
good.
recreating all of those, like, all those video packages with, like, somebody just redid the SmackDown intro, like, with, the Marilyn Manson Beautiful People song. They just redid it with, like, the current SmackDown roster. And it's like, that's insane to me that they're able to take something from so long ago and just recreate, and it's refreshed. Like, I would be like, this is acceptable. This was an acceptable intro for SmackDown because it's so good.
Yeah, they the way they compressing time is just hilarious to me because they're just like, oh, we have these months and months of segments, and we're going to compress it into 3 minutes, and you're going to go, oh god, it's like the opposite. That's the best part, and it's almost the opposite of like a movie. It's like a movie trailer for a half an hour television show, episode of television you're watching, which is the match. It's a very weird dynamic that they use to like split in between different genres in terms of consumption that I find very fascinating, especially for the way they structure the pay-per-views, where it's literally, here's a movie trailer for this 30-minute thing. Enjoy. We're going to treat it like a short film.
That's the thing is like, yeah, it's not just the video package for the pay-per-view as a whole. These are for the individual matches that some might only last 20 minutes. Like, sometimes the package is like a quarter of how long the match is going to be.
We get that huge video package before Lesnar Goldberg.
Yeah.
And then really long entrances. And then it's like, and 80 seconds later.
Yeah. That match was really something else. Did you just like time it and we're just like, what? Just going through all your papers. This doesn't make any sense.
Like
I was looking forward to. I was so excited because that match of all the matches, I was like, I was kind of like about. Like I got into a fight with a friend, and they're like, "Why? It's Lesnar and Goldberg." I'm like, I didn't really watch WC growing up, so Goldberg's like a guy to me. I can respect him, and then Lesnar is like, I like his promos, especially when he's talked by himself. Like he gets all like he goes off script and starts cursing and talking about blood and piss. It's fantastic because he's like crazy, and no one's gonna stop him. But I wasn't looking forward to it being like a 15-minute classic. That's not what that match was going to be at all. And so I was a little worried. And then like he pinned him in 6 seconds. I thought it was the greatest match ever. I was like, this is perfect. This is the match I needed for Lesnar versus Brock. Like I hope the one at WrestleMania is only like 30 seconds. Like, and then I hope the video package is like 5 minutes. Like,
it's literally the first match and the Royal Rumble scene. And then the match, and those two are just slightly longer than the actual match.
And then they have the entrances because fucking Goldberg comes from the back, and it's already gonna be, you already know, like, the entrance.
He's gonna come from, like, Alabama this time.
The entrances are gonna be longer. The entrances and the video packages collectively are gonna be, like, triple the amount of time of that match, and I'm here for it. I'm just like, that's great. It's cool. They don't need to do 20 minutes classic. It's not, no. Goldberg's gonna have a heart attack in the ring. We can't not have that. 6 seconds and we're done. Like, knock it out.
Are you gonna time WrestleMania?
Yes. So
are you going to time the entrances?
What I end up doing when I'm timing individual segments is when somebody's music hits, and then like if I don't know if it's like most of the time if Raw opens, like I know it's gonna be a promo, but with a match, yeah, I include entrance times. I start from like entrance to when it fades out into like it either cuts to like the announce team or it goes backstage. And so yeah, I count the entrances. I don't actually count like the physicality itself. I count like everything as a whole because it's time dedicated to the match. Like that is the whole because from WWE's perspective, they also counted the entrances presumably into the match. To allot the time together. But yeah, I'm going to do WrestleMania. I actually, like, last year I was doing it for Rolling Stone, rollingstone.com. I was doing, like, I did WrestleMania and then, like, whatever, and then SummerSlam and then whatever the two in between were. Right now my plan is to just do it for my Patreon subscribers. So, yeah, because that's what I've been doing right now with pay-per-views is that anybody who subscribes to my Patreon gets to see, like, the breakdowns I do of all the WWE pay-per-views that I do every month.
I think this is a good time for you to plug your Patreon, and we can wrap. Tell everyone about your Patreon and what they get, and tell them to give you money.
Well, like if they want to, like for me, it's really like I use Patreon to justify because I do the Raw. So the Raw Breakdown Project, you can see that at the rawbreakdownproject.com, and I do the Raw breakdowns. Those are there every week for free. And then I do like the little comparison I put on Twitter of Raw versus SmackDown. If you want to subscribe to my Patreon, it's patreon.com/HeyHeyKate. And then I have a couple levels from all the way to just like, if you just want to give me $1, I'll give you a high five at the show. Like that's really great that you're going to dedicate $1 to me every month. Anybody who pledges like $3 or more a month, I do like a monthly giveaway because I have all these shops and pins and stuff. And then they also get to see.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
Your shops are super awesome, especially the drop kicking donuts.
So yeah, and then that's who anybody who's $3 who contributes $3 a month or more gets to see. What they get is exclusive content, just stuff I'm working on. If I'm working on new designs, and then anybody gets to see like the pay-per-view breakdowns that I do, and I do a Raw and a SmackDown, and then any of the big four. So if you want to see the WrestleMania one, that's what you got to do.
Everyone give Kate money.
If you want to, that. Well, that was the thing is like I have so many people asking me if I'm going to do like the SmackDown Breakdown project, and it is a goal on my Patreon. Like if we hit that goal, then yes, I will do it. Every week. But the thing is like I work full time as a designer, like for an agency, and then I also do I have my own freelance business, and so it's really for me to justify to be like, if you really want to, yeah, that's great, I can do it, but I need to justify that if I do this time, like it's taking time away from other paying projects that feed my cats. So, and they don't like it when they don't have food. So.
And you're also on Twitter, right?
I am. You can follow me at Make It Loud, and that's where I post everything, like stuff I'm doing, everything, all my crazy thoughts about Raw and SmackDown. Yeah, that's really like the source where if you want to go and follow me at Twitter, that's where I post everything and new designs and all that kind of stuff. So you should follow me there. You should definitely follow me. You don't have to contribute to my Patreon if you don't want to or if you can't, but you should definitely follow me.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm doing it now. It's a lot of awesome stuff on here. And also you smacking down, pardon the pun, a lot of bros being like, well, what about this? And you're like, no, you're a moron. Go away.
I'm trying to do less of that because I just hit 3,000 followers this morning. And I woke up and I saw it and I was like, I got to be better behaved with those people that have 12 followers because it's not really nice. It's not really, I'm at an advantage if I just quote them and start insulting them. It's not very nice. Yeah.
Take them down.
There's a little bit of a blowback from the Raw Breakdown project. I've had people accuse me of having an agenda. So.
How dare you record facts?
A feminist agenda, I guess, because that's a terrible thing.
Who gives a fuck if you have a feminist? Sorry, what?
So my favorite reaction I ever got. So I got somebody submitting through my website. I thought it was a design inquiry, and it was literally, if I printed it out, it was probably gonna be a 5-page document of somebody just rambling on about why do I spend all this time worried about the women and I shouldn't worry about it. And clearly I have an agenda. And I think it was right after Jason Solomon had mentioned me on his podcast. And so he was he was ranting about Jason Solomon and how he gave me why would he even talk about me? And you both are.
How dare you give some radical feminist? Was that basically what it was?
Clearly we're in cahoots. So you with a feminist agenda, and I'm like, ah.
You mean basic equality for all human beings? I'm not. Fucking goddamn it!
I'm
I
literally
hate
regurgitating
people.
what is given back to me. I don't change anything. I make it very clear that all my times are I'm just a girl with a stopwatch. I'm not sitting here it's a very low operation. I'm in my apartment with a laptop and my phone, just time and segments.
My phone.
Yeah, God bless you. I don't know what else. Everything about it. This was a wonderful conversation at every level, but really, I'm just so impressed by your patience more than anything at all. Overall, just your patience must be you must be a Buddhist, basically.
Well, I work as a graphic designer, and so that I run into a lot of people that you have to be very patient. It goes a lot better for you personally if you're just patient with other people, because then you're just yelling all the time, and that's not good. That's not good for anybody.
Works for me. Mark, where can they find you on the internet?
Find me on Twitter at Mark_Normandin. That's Mark with a C. Wrestling writing is at Cage Side Seats Daily. Rude Awakening is the morning newsletter that I promise will actually be a newsletter at some point. Just not yet, because I'm on paternity leave and I've stopped asking questions about it. You can also find my pay-per-view stuff at sbnation.com/wrestling. If I feel like it, I'll cover Fastlane, but I'm probably going to be playing the new Zelda that morning. So, again, I'm still on paternity leave. I don't have to do anything. So consider it all a bonus.
I consider our friendship a bonus, Mark.
That's accurate.
You can find me on Twitter when I do. I'm mostly just going to be following Kate from now on Twitter at the Nixter. That's TheN1CKSTER. That is the 9 millionth time I've gotten that correct. So, Mark, don't you dare.
I'm gonna ask Kate to start tracking the amount of times you get it correct, and
You're gonna make her listen to the show, dude. That's not right.
Hey, I'm gonna have to ask for some compensation in return.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Tracking random things.
That'll be a separate Patreon, and it'll be the Rudo Radio Breakdown project. I'm fine with that.
Just breaking down podcasts. I'll listen to your podcast and I'll break it down for you.
You can find us at soundcloud.com/Rudo Radio. That's RUDORADIO. And you can rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Mark or Kate, do you have a review?
I vote Kate.
Thumbs up. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Not the emoji, though. Just the word thumbs up, exclamation point.
Yeah.
Okay. That totally works.
Yeah.
So I guess if there's nothing left to say, the only thing left to say is...